In high school, I wrote for the student newspaper. In fact, I was the advice columnist at one point, but most people reading, only 4 people in the whole school knew that I was Aunt Agatha. We came up with the name. I came up with the name, and the teacher said, okay, you're Aunt Agatha. So I was kind of like the Dear Abby of our school newspaper.
Really?
And people thought they were writing to some sweet little old lady. They were writing to me.
It's your surname.
Yes. Yes. I'm Aunt Agatha, but nobody calls me that anymore. Thank goodness.
Well, now that might change. Now that story's out.
That's what I'm afraid of.
All of my tens of listeners are going to start calling you that and tell everybody.
From the business capital of the world, the Big Apple, New York's Middle Tennessee, it says here.
That's right.
Sounds riveting. This is the Mostly Middle Tennessee Business Podcast, a podcast about Middle Tennessee business owners and professionals.
Yeah,
Mostly.
That's right. As always, thank you, Mr. Matt Wilson from the Mostly Marketing Podcast for voicing the intro. Check him out at Mostly Marketing with Matt Wilson. Maybe it's a .com, I'm not sure, but any of your favorite podcast platforms, plug that in. You should be able to pull it up. All good. Yes, this is the Mostly Middle Tennessee Business Podcast where we talk to business owners, entrepreneurs, and professionals all around the state and sometimes even beyond about all the things regarding business. It could be a myriad of businesses. It could be challenging stories, triumphant stories. We have real conversations that meander. That's what we do. This is a video and audio podcast, so make sure you check us out at MMTBP.com to pick your poison and how you want to listen to us, or if you want to watch us and see my ugly mug, that's your call. I am your host, Jim McCarthy, with JimMcCarthyVoiceovers.com and It'sYourShow.co, where we produce fine podcasts like this one, as well as others. So if you need a podcast or are considering starting one, or you need maybe a consultation on how to get your current one to the next level, give us a shout. I'll talk to you. We'll figure out something, and either you go with us, or maybe there's something, a little fix that we can do that you can take and run with it. That's what we do. Start those relationships. So today, I have a old colleague of mine. We were in the same industry. We never worked directly together. We knew a lot of the same people. And this is a great episode to listen to if you're in a legacy industry and have had to adapt over the years, i.e. radio. This is a good one because there's a lot of industries out there that are constantly having to adapt, especially radio, especially mass media. Mr. Paul Ladd with World Christian Broadcasting, sir. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jim. It's great to be here.
Is that a good intro?
Oh, that was magnificent.
That was a really cold, the music just ended. You got to love live.
Always.
Thanks for coming all the way out here. Where are you coming from, by the way? Where do you live? Or where are you working out of?
Our headquarters is in the Cool Springs area of Franklin.
Nice, not too far.
And actually, when our building was built in 1989 and 1990, most of that stuff around there was not there. It was farmland.
Right.
Even the little office strip buildings across the street weren't there.
That was a great time to buy real estate in that area.
Yes. Indeed.
Things that most radio people don't do. We never think about tomorrow or investing, or it's all about the moment and having fun and all that fun stuff. So where did you begin your broadcast? I don't, we're kind of getting to know each other. I met you at an awards show years ago. I believe it was the Air Awards.
Yes.
And you came up and introduced yourself. We had a mutual connection through Tom Bass because you either knew him or you worked with him at some point. What was that relationship?
Tom and I were in the broadcasting program at Lenore Community College in Kinston, North Carolina a few years ago.
A few years ago.
Yeah, it was only a few years ago. Tom was ahead of me, but we were kids, and, in many ways, I suppose we still are.
Yeah. Radio people are. We stay young at heart. We just age on the outside.
Yes.
Is that where you begun? Was in North Carolina?
That was where I began. I was through luck, fate, providence, the hand of God, whatever you want to call it. I wound up in the broadcasting program there. They had a 2-year broadcast program, and they had a student-run radio station. And they had just recently switched to an album rock format.
AOR.
That was part of, yes, that was,
Yeah.
Tom played a big, big part in that.
He was a rock guy always.
Oh, always.
Yeah.
And one of the best.
Yeah.
Of course, I wanted to do news.
Mm-hmm. You sound like you do news.
Well, I still do, relatively speaking. And they let me start doing stuff. There are a few things I learned there I still use. There are a few things that some people told me there that I realized I was being taken for a ride.
Mm-hmm.
One of my personal favorites on the latter was one of the second-year students. It was not Tom. Tom would never do this. But one of the second-year students said, when you take something off we had UPI because it was free. And he told me, you cannot make any changes, that it's illegal to make any changes. Because I would edit stuff because a lot of it, even though it was broadcast, was written for newspaper.
Yeah.
And I knew the difference, even as a Ute, as they say. So
These two Utes.
yes, I was editing, but I also learned you can write your own copy, and it's usually easier. I'm the hardest person I find to write for, but I'm glad I do it because, if it goes wrong, it's my fault. And also, I kind of know how I talk.
When I started with Tom, it was at the home of rock and roll, the only one in Connecticut. That joke never goes over for some reason. I guess I got to stop saying it because it was the home of rock and roll, and I always say the home, the only home, and people kind of look at me like I'm
in Connecticut. There couldn't be any more than one.
That's right. It was the home of rock and roll, or the home of rock and roll, I-95, and it was my first foray into radio on a serious basis. I worked in promotions for another radio station, and we did have a news department for some of our other radio properties, one of them being an AM station, and we used to mess with those people. My goodness. I mean, because they didn't have paper reports. Everything was on a computer. They would type it out and read off the screen, which was kind of new for the time. Nobody was really doing that. So news guy would prepare his next report, maybe go out for a cigarette or go get a drink or something. I would sneak into the studio and start putting words in and taking words out and putting funny phrases. And it was, buddy, it was a blast. It was so horrible for the on-air product, but man, we had a good time.
I had people try to steal my copy.
Right. Set it on fire or anything like that?
Not set it on fire, but they would swipe the copy and I would have to ad lib. And then there was one where a esteemed colleague, who I will not name because I promised him I would never say publicly who it was. One time I was doing the news and he dropped his pants, so I saw his red drawers on the radio.
Mm-hmm.
And I was getting right to the weather, and as soon as he dropped, I said, looks like we're going to have a full moon out tonight, and the temperature is, 71 degrees.
You know Doug Hanna?
I do.
Yeah, he's a great guy. I've had him on the show before, and I can say that I'm probably the only person that made him break on the air.
That's an accomplishment.
That is an accomplishment. I made it happen. It happened on his midday shift at Mix 92.9. He's like, you'll never get me to do it. I said, dude, gauntlet thrown, challenge accepted. And within the next 5 minutes, he's like, how did you think of that? I won't go into what I did, but it was, that'll be enough. But it was fun. A lot of fun. So from North Carolina, where did you go?
Here.
So you've been in Nashville all of your career.
Pretty much. The first couple of years when I was over in North Carolina, I also worked for 2 local radio stations doing news, going out chasing down stories, and learning something I still use today, the ability to shove a mic in someone's face and ask them questions.
Right. That's a big talent. They're
It
good
was
questions.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
I always did my homework.
Mm-hmm.
I still do. I do all the research myself. As I tell people, I have a Cracker Jack research team, talented team of bookers, and ace field crew, and usually that's me.
Is it bad that I don't do any research? I go in cold. And I think it makes for a really interesting conversation because these conversations breathe the stream of consciousness. And when you the less you know about somebody, I think almost the better because it opens up those tangents. You know what I mean? And what you're doing, yeah, you got to get something, I guess, in a certain time frame. So you got to
Right.
go in prepared.
We're limited on time.
Right.
And when you're limited on time, you've got to go through and pick out your
Yeah. You
your
came
main
prepared
stuff.
today. You've got your notes in front of
Right.
you. You've done this before.
A few times.
But you've done most of the interviewing, right?
Yes.
Is it tough to be interviewed, do you think? I think it's much easier. I love being interviewed. You want to interview me?
We'll have to do that, Jim. It's different. I'll say that.
Yeah.
I never know what people are going to ask.
Yeah.
I have been on a show a time or two where people came up with the weirdest stuff, and I'm sitting there like, huh?
Yeah.
But in this case, perfectly fine.
Yeah, we're just having a conversation.
That's right.
Yeah.
Does your garage door sound like this? If it does, it's screaming for help. Call Incredible Doors, 931-348-DOOR. We're making garage doors in Murray and Williamson counties work better, sound better, and, well, spring better. We just make them incredible again. Incredible Doors in Spring Hill. When your door's springs break, you need remote reconnections, opener installation, or just about anything to do with your garage door, go to IncredibleDoors.com or call 931-348-DOOR. Follow us on Facebook for specials on maintenance visits, keypads, and other items. 931-348-DOOR.
I love your setup in here. This is nice.
Thank you. I have a little bit of, experience in somewhat, not really building studios, not like from an engineer's perspective that some of the guys we worked with that built out radio and production studios. But, it's bare bones basic, I wouldn't be doing it without the Rodecaster you could check it out at Rode. And of course, go to my website and find all the things that I use. I use the Rodecaster Pro 2, which is I wouldn't be doing podcasting without this because it's a radio board for podcasts. And that's the way, when they came out with it, I was like, oh man, game on. Because I was doing podcasting, but from my closet where I did voiceover. And I just kind of like, well, hey, I could get on a Zoom and talk to somebody and put it out there as a podcast and call it a day. But when it came to actually doing in-person podcasts, what a nightmare. You had to get a recorder. I like to have video. So you got to get a camera. Then you got to have a headphone amp and all that stuff. I'm like, it would just be nice to have a place to do it. So this room is up for rent, by the way. It's your show.co. That's what we do. So how many plugs can I fit in the first under 10 minutes?
I'm impressed.
Thank you.
And they're very subtle.
They're very subtle. They're part of the conversation.
I love your
old Uncle Phil used to do it that well. He was really good at that. So was Michael Del Giorno.
Yes.
Yeah.
Phil was a good guy. I worked with him. I knew Phil back when he was still the nighttime jock at the old WLAC FM.
Yeah.
And I worked in the newsroom the first time I was there more than once. I kept coming back. I don't know why. But I would be working in the newsroom the afternoon, early evenings. Phil would come in, and we would sometimes watch the old Crossfire on CNN.
Mm.
And Phil would discuss political stuff with me from the perspective of his dad, who is, you probably know, served 12 years in Congress from North Carolina.
Yeah.
Idimus Thaddeus Valentine Jr.
And he was a Democrat.
Yes. A conservative Democrat, though.
Yeah.
He was elected right after there was some redistricting and so forth. And he was the surprise winner, according to the pundits. I'm sure Mr. Valentine felt he was going to win, but Phil and I would talk about that. We'd talk about the late Walter B. Jones Sr.,
Mm-hmm.
the congressman, who was a longtime congressman and had a serious drinking problem.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, they even named the treatment center at East Carolina University Hospital after him, which we thought was kind of funny. Funny story about Walter B. One time when I was still a little kid reporter, I was interviewing him, sitting across from him, much closer than we are now, because he was very hard of hearing. We were sitting across from each other, and he had one of those big, long cigarettes. And his hand was trembling.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point, there were a lot of ashes coming down, and part of the little part that was on fire. If I had not moved, I would have gotten burned on, my thigh, probably burned a hole in my pants or something. But I moved when I saw it coming. But
Mm-hmm.
it was just one of those things, how many people can say, like, yes, I almost got burned by my congressman. Literally.
Right. Now you had that story, man.
Yes.
That's great. Yeah, with Phil, I got to know him. He reached out to me. I think I had him on my podcast, and because of that, we started becoming friends. And then he asked me to be the voice of the podcast he was doing with his son, the Pod Goats, with Campbell.
Mm-hmm.
So I did the intro voice for him, and I had him on again. Actually, oddly enough, from Mercedes-Benz in Music City, we did a live podcast from their dealership, and it was kind of a concept I was experimenting with. And then I had him on yet again with his son to talk about the Pod Goats. But it was what a great guy, man! What a day to find out that he passed.
I did not realize on one of his commercials, and I forgot which one it was. I forgot what they were advertising, but there was the character Herbert Walker down to the office.
Mm-hmm.
He did all the voices on that. I knew he did the voice of Mr. Snodgrass, the boss.
Mm-hmm.
And that was an inside joke, Snodgrass Tower in Nashville, named for a guy who I think was the state comptroller or something. And then Herbert Walker, who was the character, Bush the father's middle name's George Herbert Walker Bush.
Right.
And there were a couple of other characters, but he did all of those.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was an insurance company. I didn't realize he did all the voices till somebody said, he's doing all of them.
He was a character.
Yes.
He was definitely like a character actor that just kind of fell into being a radio guy. But I think at the heart, he was just an entertainer. He understood that. His son is very much the way, his kids are very much the same way. I think Campbell, especially, very talented kid. I'd love to reconnect with him because he's such, whenever you have him on a podcast, or he's just witty, he's funny, he's got a great voice, he's fun to listen to, great stories. Just a great dude overall. But yeah, man, I forgot about that. You could actually still hear Phil's voice on another podcast I produced called Tips, Tactics, and Tools. And he was nice enough to cut the intro for them. So we just started production on their podcast recently, just starting it back up. And it's like one of those, well, that's right, I forgot he voiced it. It was good to hear his voice again, So you made a bunch of inroads here, your entire career here in Nashville. So you know all the players and stuff like that. Any other desire, any other opportunity to kind of go other markets throughout your career?
I have had opportunities. Some of them did not work out, obviously. And then some of them I was like, no, we're not going to do that.
Right.
I mean, I've done a lot of things here. And, now thinking back on a long career, we won't say how long, but I realize, sometimes, you bloom where you're planted.
Yeah.
I think of the big markets. One of my goals way back when was to be on KYW News Radio in Philadelphia, which is my home turf. But now with the Odyssey takeover and all that sort of thing, no.
Yeah. I had similar situation. My big move was to Vegas from Connecticut, and it gave me perspective because I always wanted to land in New York. I thought that was the, from a radio standpoint, yeah, that's the top of the heap. That's market number one. And then I worked for CBS Radio, back then known as Infinity. So we worked with a lot of the New York people, and you'd hear stories and you go, that sounds like a place I don't want to be. And of course, it gave us perspective in terms of cost and being able to live, because Vegas was much cheaper at that point than Connecticut and the whole Northeast, where we came from. So it enables us to buy a house, and it's like, oh my gosh, it's affordable on a radio salary, and my wife was working as well. But man, and then we wanted to move back east, and I said, I didn't want to get back to the Northeast. I looked at Atlanta and Charlotte and Raleigh and those areas. And oddly enough, never looked at Nashville until I saw an ad come up, and it was for the Engelbrechts here in Nashville, and yeah, that's how we landed here in 05, and here we've stayed. Don't plan on leaving. So.
I was there before you at what is now Mix 92.9. It was,
It was the oldie station before Jack.
Yes, there was, well, the oldie station wasn't there then.
Right.
It was just us, Light FM 92.9. I think I still have the shirt somewhere. And then it was Light 93 FM. I still have that T-shirt too. And it was interesting because they had just switched over from elevator music.
Mm-hmm.
I believe the official term is beautiful music, but I always called it elevator music.
Right.
And I would go places and people would say, "You took my easy music away." Well, I didn't do that. Well, you tell them I need to bring it back, or you tell them I bring it back. And I'm thinking, I don't make the decisions. I just do the news. I do the traffic.
Yeah.
And it was interesting doing the traffic because they wanted us basically to do the traffic and then go straight to commercial without saying, "I'm Paul Ladd with traffic, blah, 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 blah."
Mm-hmm.
But I just thought that sounded kind of weird. You'd say, "And we've got accidents on I-40 at Uncle Fessler's Lane, and of course, 12th Avenue South at Leland." And then they'd go to the commercial. I just thought that sounded kind of abrupt.
Mm-hmm.
So I would just always throw in, "That's Light FM traffic."
Mm-hmm.
I would always do that because it also helps the guy running the board to know, hey, when I got to go to commercial.
Right. Well, that's the problem with podcasting these days. Needs a lot of radio help. I listen to a lot of podcasts, as do most people. And now that with the dynamic ad insertion, they're cutting off, like there'll be guys talking and mid-sentence, it'll stop and go to a commercial. It's like, what, dude?
I've noticed that.
You need some sort of produced elements here to give the listener a warning, because that it's annoying. It serves the client to no end because all you're doing is fast forwarding it. I coach all my clients. Look, if you're going to run spots, at least let the listener know and say, "Hey, this is what's funding this. If you love what we're doing, make sure you stick around and listen to our clients, and then we'll be right back."
I would agree with you. And a lot of podcasts I hear, not yours,
right?
Because you know what you're doing. You're a professional.
I've got a lot of people fooled.
I'm not sure what to say to that, Jim.
I'm glad you think I know what I'm doing.
Some of them will come on, and it'll be the first 15 minutes. They're talking about inside stuff that only they know, and the audience is like, "What are you guys talking about?"
Mm-hmm.
And it's, like, I was in the supermarket today. "Oh, did you get the, the fruit cocktail in the can that Ethel wanted?" That kind of thing. And I'm thinking, who cares?
Yeah, it's like, when it's done right, that kind of inside stuff can work if you're following the show. Longtime personalities. You could hear an Imus doing that, Howard Stern. If you're listening and tuning in every day, and you have context to those types of stories, that's when they can work. But whenever those things kind of happen, I'm like, guys, keep in mind, you're talking to people that have no idea what you're talking about. You got to give them context. Hey, just an offshoot here. We had this thing happening before, and so-and-so asked me to do this thing. That's why I was in the grocery store and I was looking for this thing. And the funny story is this. So go ahead. What were you saying? At least give it, set it up. I agree with you. You can't go in. The other thing that annoys me to no end is, hey, so how is it near you? Especially when they're virtual, they're in like different parts of the country. "Oh, well, it's sunny out here. How's it?" But it's like, dude, is this really compelling talking about what kind of weather you're having? Or the best is when they starting to go, "Hey, can you hear me okay?" No, stop.
That's why we have editing.
They don't edit it out.
And they don't have to use razor blades anymore.
I know. Well, I don't know if my radio career would have flourished if digital production techniques hadn't come to fruition. Because I learned cutting and splicing tape, how to, relatively put a decent sounding product together. But then when they came out with they had SAW back in the 90s, which is a really clunky way. It was their way into like the beta version of digital editing at the time. software audio workshop was what it was called. And then it graduated to like the Orban systems and stuff like that. I cut my teeth with Vegas and SoundForge, which I still use to this day. And without that, man, would have been a different career. I don't know if I would have done it.
I remember when they were bringing in audio editing at Metro Networks.
Mm-hmm.
Before it was Metro Networks, a Westwood One company.
Yeah.
We had to say that every time we answered the phone, which is kind of weird.
Yeah.
So we just started saying it every time where do we work? Metro Networks, a Westwood One company.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, they were talking about bringing in digital editing, and I'm like, I don't know about this, blah, blah, blah. Well, our operations manager, Alan Edwards, showed me how to use it. Within 5 minutes, I was like, get the old stuff out of here.
Yeah.
Game
changer.
Oh, big time.
Yeah.
And I still use that to this day.
Mm-hmm.
We had Cool Edit, then it became Cool Edit 2.0.
And Audacity, I think it's called.
Pro. It's Adobe Audition.
That's
now.
right. That's right.
Audacity is another one. It's good, but I'm more proficient with the Adobe Audition.
Yeah.
And I have had people ask me, why do you use that? Thinking, if I did not have this, I would not be able to do what I do.
Right. Right. And you get to a point even
Right.
like with video editing softwares and stuff like that, because Vegas is primarily a video editing platform now. It started out as a multi-tracker for audio. And it frustrates me to some point where I'm like, oh, that's it. I'm done. I'm looking for, I need to learn Final Cut or Premiere or DaVinci, that kind of thing. And I try all these programs and I'm like, it's not that I don't want to learn. I don't have the time to sit here and learn a way to do all this stuff anymore. It's not the best use of my time, So I go and I figure out what's wrong with Vegas. And every time, okay, I found the solution. Okay, we're good. And I always go back to Vegas. It's the most user-friendly platform out there. I got it right behind me on my computer. So I was working on it before you came here, putting stuff out. But you get to the point, like, you've been on music radio as a jock, correct? Has it always been news?
At our college station, yes, there are a few tapes out there of me playing album rock, which will never be heard by anyone else.
I'd love to hear those.
Especially the time they handed me a record and I announced that we were about to hear a song by Billy Squeer.
That stuff happens all the time, though,
I never heard of the guy.
Right.
And now here's Billy Squeer with Everybody Wants You.
And for those of you who don't know, it's Billy Squire. That's the artist name. Yeah.
But at least we had a classical show and a fellow one afternoon was subbing for someone and said, and now we're going to hear some Chopin.
Oh, gosh. Well, how about this? When I was on I-95, the Led Zeppelin song, Your Maker. Because if you read it, it's Dire Maker. And that's the way I was saying it. Bass man, he's like, hey, man, it's your maker. You gotta be saying it that way, man.
That's a good imitation.
Thank you. Come on, man. Pull the trigger. We used to cajole Bass man because he was a huge fantasy baseball guy. And towards the end of his time at the radio station, Bass was more involved with fantasy baseball than actually, because that's the thing is like once radio went automated, the fun kind of went out of it. You didn't have to pull your music. You didn't, and for those of you who are listening and are not aware, back in the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s, you used to, you'd look at your log and then have to pull your commercials, pull the hours worth of music, whether it was on vinyl or CD or what have you, and stack them up. And you'd be able to, pop them in. And at the top of every hour, you'd go ahead and do the same thing and repopulate. And that's how the DJ was DJing. He was jockeying the discs, so to speak. So he was, once they went automated, everything was on a hard drive and fireable by a big square button. That's how I learned. But we had that system go down one time. The whole system went down, and it was so much fun. Because
how much fun was it?
It was so much fun, Paul, that I'm still telling this story to this day. That's how much fun I had.
Wow.
And it's like everybody they had the fully staffed, the shifts and everything. You couldn't voice track. It was like just for a moment, I got a taste of what it was like. It was a blast.
We had queue records. We had to queue up the records, I should say. And some of the records had cue burn because we had a couple of guys who wanted to be club jocks, and they would take the records into the production room and play disco.
Mm-hmm.
It was the weirdest thing. But I will tell you something about Bassman you may not know. He actually helped me on a project where I am now at World Christian.
Really?
When I first got there, we were assigned to do a series. I was assigned to a series on busy. You might be too busy if.
Mm-hmm.
And it was based on a book by my friend Gary Holloway. And we wanted bumper music. We wanted different types of music for each segment.
Mm-hmm.
So I sent him, I said, well, I need some different ones. And I said what the different chapters were. And he sent me a list of songs, complete with his comments about each, as only Bassman could say. And he was like, use this version. Somebody else did a version, but it's absolute dreck or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I used bumper music. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to credit him.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, no, you don't have to do that. Well, on the last segment, I credited everybody who helped produce.
Nice.
And I threw in him because, he deserved a lot of credit because that was, I think, a big part of the listenability of the series was the music.
Yeah.
And we used some different stuff. We used different stuff with each. We used a different song for each segment. But one of the ones was Life is a Highway. He said, use the original by Tom Cochran. Do not use the.
Rascal Flatts?
Yes.
That was a remake.
I forgot
Cars.
Yes.
The movie Cars.
He said, I forgot if he said it was hideous or abysmal, which I tend to agree. Compared. I mean, Tom Cochran was the real dude.
Oh, yeah. You ever look at the lyrics of that song? Man, what was he on? It's an odd song.
I look at a lot of lyrics and wonder what they're on.
Yeah.
I mean, even some of the religious lyrics. You're thinking like,
really?
Okay, what were they? It's like, I got religion. Yeah. We will praise him in a box. We will praise him with a fox. It's almost like Dr. Seuss got saved or something.
Nice. So you so a majority of your life spent in news journalism, because I mean that I could see why, because news is very interesting. It's changing. For me, being on the air it got boring real quick. We weren't playing new music. We were playing new music at night, which was my shift. But even the new music was still measured against the acid test of being classic rock friendly. Because we were a classic rock station. We weren't an alternative. We weren't active rock. I always wanted to work for an active rock station, but my superpower was in the production room because it was ever changing. Being able to bring words to life off of a piece of paper and, finding the right music bed and just really learning that craft. And then when you got into radio imaging production, and again, for those of you who are listening and don't know what radio imaging is, it's the stuff in between the songs that those bumpers that Paul was saying earlier. You'd hear like 103.3 WKDF, real rock, and some sort of a stinger or explosion or bombs or rockets, swishes, zaps. I got really good at that under Tom's tutelage. He really taught me a lot about that and, how to put things into context, how to make them, go from fast to slow, slow to fast, to do different things for songs and stuff like that. He was one of my biggest mentors still to this day in that business. Great guy.
Absolutely.
So is that the reason why you stuck with news, or did you always have like a journalism background interest? I guess, obviously.
Well, I guess my journalism career started in the 7th grade when I wrote for the junior high newspaper. I wrote a story on bomb threats. We were against them, of course, but we had a few.
Right.
And in high school, I wrote for the student newspaper. In fact, I was the advice columnist at one point, but most people reading, only 4 people in the whole school knew that I was Aunt Agatha. We came up with the name. I came up with the name, and the teacher said, okay, you're Aunt Agatha. So I was kind of like the Dear Abby of our school newspaper.
Really?
And people thought they were writing to some sweet little old lady. They were writing to me.
It's your surname.
Yes. Yes. I'm Aunt Agatha, but nobody calls me that anymore. Thank goodness.
Well, now that might change. Now that story's out.
That's what I'm afraid of.
All of my tens of listeners are going to start calling you that and tell everybody. Getting into that, though, I mean, what inspired you from a young age? Who did you listen to, and who did you emulate?
I watched the guys on TV, the local guys, the network guys. Larry Kane at most recently at Comcast. He was at all three of the traditional 3 network stations in Philadelphia, worked for ABC for a time.
Mm-hmm.
He's always big influence, and in more recent years has become a mentor. Another guy who has been a mentor of mine, professional-wise, Chris Clark over at Channel 5 here in Nashville. He's retired now. Paul Randall Dickerson at WLAC, a.k.a. The Chief.
Mm-hmm.
Tom Joyner, who owned our radio station in North Carolina, taught me so much, not just about broadcasting, but about leadership, about life. He was friends with the chairman of the Federal Communications Commission, Mark Fowler,
Mm-hmm.
who was coming to town, and he said, "We need to do an interview." And I was like, "Yes, sir."
Mm-hmm.
He said, and he was rubbing his hands. He was excited. We'll get some stories on the AP. We'll get some publicity for this. When we did the interview, we did not have anybody to run the board in the studio that day. And he wanted it to be perfect. I remember he said, "Wear your best suit."
Mm-hmm.
So I wore my 3-piece gray pinstripe suit from Belk and went in. Mark Fowler had just been down on the lake. So he still had on his boat shoes and his pullover shirt and everything. But we went into Mr. Joyner's office. Mr. Joyner did something that stuck with me. We did the interview and he left the room. He left a dopey kid in there to interview the head of the FCC, his friend, and the dopey kid was representing his station.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, he didn't consider you to be dopey. That's what I would read from it.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
But, I always thought I was a dopey kid.
How old were you at the time?
19, I think.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, man. Did you rise to the occasion?
I thought the interview went very well, and Mr. Joyner told me later that Mr. Fowler was very impressed.
Yeah.
And we aired the interview pretty much in its entirety on our weekly public affairs show. We had stories on the news. I wrote the AP stuff. And then at the end, Mr. Joyner came back in toward the end of the interview, only to take a photo, which I still have to this day. We're sitting there. We had that wood panel stuff from the 70s
Mm-hmm.
in Mr. J's office. And we're sitting there. And
70s version of shiplap.
Right. And we recorded it. We had a special microphone rigged up for my boombox.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't have a tape recorder. So it was a stereo boombox, but our engineer, Alan Cass, brilliant guy, made a mic that we could stick in there. And so my boombox is in the photo too. I still have it. It doesn't really work anymore, but I keep it mostly as a museum piece.
Yeah. Those things are cool to look at from time to time.
Yes.
I'd love to see that because that technology always, it's still fun to look at and how just complex yet so simple it is.
Hey, cassette recorders still get the job done. I was in Philadelphia one time on an assignment, and we were still using mini discs. Don't ask me why. They were here for all of about 15 seconds.
Yeah.
So I thought, what are we going to do? I found one mini disc in all of Center City, Philadelphia. I went to a place called Funko Mart, which was on Chestnut Street. But Funko Mart was moving, so they didn't have any at that location. They said everything's boxed up at the new place. I went in one store and I found one, a gold one, for like $5, but I was like, I need more than this. So I thought, what am I going to do? I walked across the street to Kmart, plunked down $20 for a General Electric cassette recorder, $1 for a 90-minute cassette. Boom, we're back in business.
Yeah.
People can say, well, your audio quality wasn't as good. And I'm like, hey, we had audio.
It worked in a pinch.
That's right. It did.
Yeah.
And I got to keep the tape recorder too.
We are so spoiled these days.
I know.
My goodness.
We are.
It's like I remember even taking patch cables out to interface with different outboard gear to get different effects on vocals and all that fun stuff. What a pain in the butt, man. Gosh. Actually, I used to, in Vegas, we still had the standalone reel-to-reel. And from time to time, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to record this on the reel-to-reel because it's like once in a while, it's actually fun. And I would sit there and use the grease pencil and everything, just keep my skills up. I probably still could do it,
We have in our hallway at the Radio Ranch, it's a framed box kind of thingy of the different technologies. They had reel-to-reel, DAT.
Oh, gosh, DATs. Forgot about those.
I use those. I interviewed Kellyanne Conway of Trump administration fame on a DAT recorder years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So every time I see a DAT, I always think of Kellyanne Conway. But we had DAT, we had reel-to-reel, we had cassette, they had the mini disc, and I think maybe there's a old flash drive in there or something. But we show how it's evolved.
We cataloged all of the commercials we produced on mini disc. I want to say in Connecticut, maybe Connecticut was DAT, but mini disc was a technology we used in Vegas, and we would log everything just to have a record of it in case you needed to clear out the hard drive. But that was about the extent I would use mini disc for. It was just cataloging and logging stuff because it could hold a lot of, it was pre-iPod days, and external hard drives and things of that nature. External hard drives were a new thing back in 03, 04,
Well, mini discs, I was at the Reagan Library years ago doing a story for World Christian, interviewed Duke Blackwood, who was the executive director, and I hit the wrong button on the mini disc, erased the whole interview.
Oh, gosh.
We were about to start doing it over when his secretary came in and said, Mrs. R is on the phone. Not Mrs. Robinson, not Mrs., Rabinowitz. Nancy Reagan was on the phone. So obviously we didn't get to do that over at that point.
Right. That's like the worst feeling. Or when you think you got an interview and you forgot to hit record. Oh, the pit of your stomach. Just, oh, what a feeling. It's awful.
Or the time I interviewed John Dean, we were still using the mini disc. John Dean, the Watergate guy. And the recorder messed up.
Mm-hmm. That happens
And
too.
I kept thinking of all the people to interview.
Yeah.
My friend Kim Shadoan over at Lipscomb University, who helped set up the interview, said, Paul, of all the people to interview, a Watergate guy, and the recorder fouls up.
Yeah.
Well, the recording was still there.
Mm-hmm.
We found a guy in Arizona we could send the mini disc to, and he could fix it because there were a lot of gaps. Basically, he put it back together, edited.
That's the thing, man. When you got a guy at the helm who knows what they're doing, because that's happened to me before, where I'll be maybe a couple seconds in and realize, because I'm typically in situations where I'm doing a podcast for a client, they'll have me on as an executive producer, which means I'm taking notes, I'm listening to the audio, I'm coaching them whenever we're taking breaks, I'm looking at a camera feed, those things. So you're juggling a lot of balls. But sometimes you forget, you'll make sure you hit the video and then you say go. And then like, oh crap, a couple seconds in, you realize the red light's not on the audio recorder, in this case, the Rodecaster. And you just go ahead and hit it. And I always think to myself, well, I know I have past stuff I could patch with. And that experience is priceless, in my opinion, because that was, for me, let's see, I started in 96, almost 30 years of experience that I could rely on,
And nowadays we're incorporating more stuff.
Yeah.
At World Christian, we are incorporating more video to what we do.
As you should.
A lot of times when I'm interviewing people, we do it, if it's remote, we do it on Zoom.
Yeah.
So a lot of times I have my Anchor Boy outfit on if I'm doing it from my home studio.
Yeah.
I have which is basically what I'm wearing now, except I probably have shorts on.
Yeah. Because you're dressed up really nice for this interview. I don't think I've had anybody dressed as well as you on this podcast.
I wanted to make a good impression.
You've already made that. You didn't need to. You could have showed up in a nice little polo or something.
I don't even know if I've got one, but I wanted to also, show off my bargain business clothes from Boscov's department store. See, I worked in a plug too.
That's right. Let's do that.
But we are doing that now, and of course, it's good for promotional videos when our fundraising guys go around and show, because that's how we bring in money. We do not sell advertising, and we never ask listeners for money.
Right.
Ever.
Now, how do you monetize it?
We have a team of fundraisers who talk to individuals and churches who are interested in what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how they do it.
Are you still in a news capacity with World Christian Broadcasting?
Pretty much. It's a little different from, say, working in talk radio. I mean, I'm not doing a newscast every 30 minutes, every hour, but I do stories. Our format is magazine format, similar to NPR Got Religion. It's probably the best way to describe it. And sometimes I think they need it, but that's another story.
Right.
We do 3 to 7 minute segments. It might be an interview with, I'll pull out one, Senator Joseph Lieberman, but we didn't talk about why you should vote for Joseph Lieberman or why you should vote this way. He had written a book on the Sabbath.
Mm-hmm.
So we talked about that. And he pointed out that God invented the day off. The idea of a day off came from God because he was the first guy to take a day off. First guy with a capital G, I should say, to take a day off.
Yes.
We don't get into political stuff. If we have a politician on, it's to talk about perhaps an issue, not no advocacy, that kind of thing. We've done stories on anxiety and depression, parenting. I have done some on our American Highway segment where we'll go visit. I went to visit Christ Church in Philadelphia. We did a story there. We did one at the we did one at the Philadelphia Museum of Art on Cezanne, because we're reaching people around the world. So we want to get something that'll reel them in.
Yeah.
So I do a lot of art stories. Most news organizations take a story, a global story, and localize it. Well, being based here in Nashville, we might take a local story and globalize it if there's an international perspective. We did a Japanese art story at the Frist, and the Consulate General for Middle Tennessee, for the state of Tennessee, was there. And we did an interview with him, and within 2 days, his office was calling, where can the people hear this in Japan? They want to hear this.
That's the thing, is that please tell me you're making podcasts or something out of it, digital.
That is in the works.
Yeah. And
we
if
don't
there's
have
anything
a big,
I can help you with, let me know.
Oh, I'll let the guys know.
Yeah.
Andy and Brian, if you're listening, this is the guy to talk to.
Yeah.
We don't have a big staff.
Yeah. Radio. That's the thing, Paul, about radio these days, is that I've been out there very publicly championing the notion that, look, if radio has decided that you have no value to it anymore and you find yourself on the other end of a layoff or something like that, please understand that podcasting needs you. I can't do all this by myself. I'm trying to influence as many people as I possibly can. I put out a post on Facebook, last week, talking about how 98% of podcasters are very are trying. There's about 2% of podcasters that are very successful. Rogan and Sean Ryan here in Franklin is another one. I think he's in the top 1 or 2%. I produce a podcast here locally called the Try That in a Small Town podcast, based on the song by Jason Aldean. It's hosted by the 4 songwriters. Go check that out at Try That Podcast. Try That in a Small Town Podcast.com. I've had those guys, actually, one half of the group was on a couple episodes ago. Great conversation. But they need radio people, because the quality of podcasts can vastly and greatly be improved, from audio quality, from production, things of that nature. And you hear some facilities, some organizations that are doing it well. You listen to like the Office Ladies, and that organization is doing very well, because I think they have at least audio-centric people at the helm, or maybe somebody from radio. My point is that don't think that you're done. I thought in 2013, when I got out of radio, I was done. What use is my skill set? I had never thought in a million years that my skill set and what I did in radio would still be in vogue more than ever. It's crazy. from voiceover to production, all the imaging experience that I've had, producing all the things that I've for a multitude of stations throughout my career, that's coming in very handy right now. And it pays well.
And radio is still vibrant.
It's still but the people in it need to realize that.
Right.
The people at the top. It's still a vibrant thing. It's still a bona fide good medium.
I'm lucky because at our shop, our guys realize that.
Yeah. You got to pivot though, buddy. There's got to be a pivot to the podcast. That's the next thing.
Oh, absolutely. And there is some progress on that. But we broadcast, we broadcast worldwide, and a lot of people, they're still listening to the radio.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Think
mean,
of how many people you get reached via digital, YouTube, and all the other channels.
The YouTube channel is in the works right now. My personal YouTube channel is our de facto YouTube, but we
Good
put
for
that
you.
on. Well, I put my stuff on there, and I also put my some of my church singing on there. So
Nice.
So you get a little bit of everything on that channel.
Because what I'm hearing is that the stories you do and the things that you're coming up with, those are little, the micro content things that people could really dive into. Mike Rowe, you're familiar with Mike?
Yes, Dirty
From
Jobs.
Dirty Jobs. He's got a show called The Way I Heard It. And it's Paul Harvey. He's basically doing what Paul Harvey used to do. And to a great extent, he's doing a wonderful job because he's Mike Rowe. And he's funny, he's smart, he's likable. He tells a great story. He's got a fantastic voice. And it's just amazing to see how he went into that. Because he was a broadcasting guy too, television. But, he adapted and pivoted.
And that is what we're doing now.
Yeah.
We're, it doesn't move as fast as we would like because, we don't have the staff and everything, of course. When you're a nonprofit, is dependent on funding.
Yeah.
But our people are doing a great job. We hear from listeners all over the world. And in fact, a scoop here.
Yeah. Ooh.
We are soon, our Spanish language program, we broadcast in 8 different languages, Spanish language show, La Voz Alegre, the happy voice. La Voz Alegre will soon be allowed in Cuba.
Wow. Nice.
Because we're not political. We don't tell people.
There we go. Dude, I'm telling you, I got production on this.
You do.
That's why you wear the headphones.
And that's the first time a religious show has been allowed on there, but we're not political.
Yeah.
A lot of religious faith-based radio is political. We're not.
Yeah.
And I get pitched stuff you would not believe. I'm sure you got pitched a few in your time. I've gotten pitched some really strange stuff in my time.
Yeah.
There was the toilet training segment I got pitched at World Christian, and I showed it to our then Vice President of Programming, Gail Crow, kind of as a joke. And he was like, "Oh, this is good." I was like, "Yeah." He goes, "I'm not kidding." And I'm thinking like,
Oh, seriously?
so I interviewed
Because I was joking.
the pediatrician. It was a pediatrician, and we had a lot of double entendres, I will say that.
Yeah.
Most of them flew right over her head. But we opened the segment with a toilet flushing.
Right.
And then we talked about toilet training. And Gail was so impressed he played it at the board of directors meeting, and I still have a job these years later.
Sometimes those are the things that work,
Now, we did not do the world's first Christian, or was it Christian adult entertainment star? We actually got pitched that. I remember showing that to Gail, and he was like, "You can probably get 2 or 3 segments out of this." And then he started laughing, so I knew he was kidding.
Christian, so that was you were spoofing it.
No, we actually got pitched that by somebody.
What was the idea?
I have no idea because I was just thinking, I just showed him the email and he's like,
Well, okay, what do you mean by adult entertainment? Where are we going with this? Is this like Adult Swim when you're at the pool? No kids?
people will do anything. They will do anything to get you to run their story. Have you ever been to the National Religious Broadcasters, Jim?
No.
Okay, it's an event every year. It's quite an event. We go because it's kind of like our Bonnaroo, minus the smell.
Right.
And we go, and minus the exotic
psychedelic drugs.
Yes, yes. Exotic treats, is one of my teachers used to say. And we go, we're working press. We're not members of NRB, but we go as working press, and they've always been wonderful to us. But people will come, show up, and pitch stuff. They'll hang out in the press room. I've had people pitch me interviews when I was interviewing someone else. slide me a pitch sheet while my victim is talking. And my victim, to his eternal credit, did not miss a beat. I was super impressed.
Yeah.
He didn't miss it. He just kept on going. I've had people pitch me while I'm standing in line to get a slice or get a sandwich at lunch. But I've had people pitch me in the can.
Really?
Yes.
Now that I got you
Captive audience.
for sure.
And you've been in Opryland Hotel here in Nashville.
I have.
Okay. The men's room, ladies' room in there are huge. I've lived in houses that weren't that big. And there was this guy standing in the front. He was handing out press releases, collaring everybody when they went in. And when he was done, or at least he paused, and I thought he was done, I said, "Can I go to the can now?" And then another time, this fellow followed me in there to the business area and asked me if I was with the press. So I held up my little badge and said, "Yes, I'm with the press." Well, I've got this book, and he was dressed like Uncle Sam. I left that part out. He had an Uncle Sam outfit on. So he starts pitching while we're in the can. And, he follows me out when I'm done. No, we did not do that interview. I was like, let me talk to my producer about it. And a shout out to my producer, Rob Scobie. When I say, let me talk to my producer about it, 99% of the time,
it's a no.
That's Paul speak for ain't going to happen.
Ain't going to happen. I'm going to.
And they don't know him. So he said he doesn't mind being the bad guy.
Paul, that's the way to kind of pass it off. If he signs off on it, I'll just blame him. So if he's not on with it, I don't know what I can tell you. So was it the nature of what he was pitching or the manner in which he was pitching it?
Mostly the nature of what he was pitching. He was pitching a book showing that America was prophesied in the Bible.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Now, we don't get into prophecy stuff on our air. We don't get into prophecy stuff, hot button issues. We don't get into that because we're trying to reach people who have often been ignored or don't have access to our message.
Yeah.
And that would be too Americans. If it's too American-centric, we're not going to do it because we do worldwide. We've had people, there's a group, with my luck, they're probably listening and it'll send me hate mail. There's a group called the American Heritage Girls. It's kind of a more conservative version of the Girl Scouts. Well, I'd met the lady once. That's too American-centric for us. Right. She's a nice lady. She got I would love to have her on to tell her personal story. It's really good. But I don't know that she will now because somebody introduced me again. And I said, "Oh, yeah, you're with the Campfire Girls."
Mm-hmm.
She didn't like that because the Campfire Girls is a separate organization.
Right.
And she didn't let me sing the jingle. I was going to say, "Hey, I know your little jingle."
Mm-hmm.
Sing around the campfire, join the Campfire Girls. When I was a kid, that was on every channel.
Right.
But we get pitched stuff like, we got pitched one called the Trump Code.
Mm-hmm.
Huh? I read it and I was thinking, we wouldn't do that. Or, what's the Christian position on Biden officials' environmental statement? There's not one.
Right.
I mean, most of the PR people I work with are great, love them to death. But, there's always a few in every business. They're pitching stuff thinking, "Oh, you'll be interested in this."
Right.
We're not interested in adult entertainment. I mean,
if you're talking like billiards or something like that,
Oh, yes.
That qualifies as adult entertainment to an extent.
But this is what Archie Bunker would have called your hardcore pornography,
right.
I think is how Archie would have said it.
Right.
But you have good books, and then you have some strange books pitched because we get a lot of author pitches.
But kudos to the guy who got you in the bathroom, because here you are remembering the story. He dressed as Uncle Sam. He wanted to stand out. He wanted attention. And that was what's kind of like earned him the ability to pitch you his bad idea. So you remember the bad idea, but you also remember here you are regaling the story. He made himself stand out. If he had a good idea, it might have turned out differently.
We ended up flushing that idea.
But actually, hold on. There we go.
But it happens.
It's right there. I had a guy, I'm a member of BNI, which is a network, business networking group. And he came as a visitor. I get up, I hold the voiceover and podcasting seat in the group. And he found out I did voiceover, and he comes over. He says, I've got a book and I want it read. Okay, let's talk. So he sends me an email. He was, first of all, violated all sorts of decorum with our group because he didn't know when to stop, that we give him 30 seconds to address the entire room. Yeah, he went on for like 3 minutes, and we're like dinging him and like, dude, okay, we get it. His whole premise was that he should be president, even though he's not a naturalized citizen. And he was, his book was an effort to convince the government to change the rules on who can be a president, even if you weren't born here. And utter nonsense, crazy talk. He sent it to me via email, and he says, well, what I'll do is that this is going to be such an amazing book. I'll cut you on the profits, which is a common thing that most voiceover people do when they narrate a book, just to get the experience and the reps and things of that nature. Typically, these books don't sell anything. So as a voiceover person, you get paid for nothing. And my position, being that I've been doing voiceover since the 90s, is, well, hey, here's how much it'll cost you to have me read your entire book. Here's what you're going to get. And I kind of bundle it up. I do the whole sales approach to it. And he goes, he says, well, this is going to be a great book. You're going to miss out. I said, you know what? I completely understand where you're coming from, but why, if it's, you're really bought into this? Oh yeah. I said, why would you want to give me a cut? Don't you want to keep it all for yourself? I said, you're getting out from under this. You're getting me for a bargain. He said, because he was telling me I was too expensive. I said, sure, there's other people that'll do it for less, but
They won't be as good.
They won't be as good. And I'm willing to do it for a bargain because according to you, this thing's going to be a blockbuster. Yeah, I never heard back from him. So
Another weird pitch we got was via email from some publicity agency. Said, you're always presenting the Christian perspective.
right.
Well, yeah, it's World Christian Broadcasting.
Yes.
I mean, that's kind of like our middle name.
It's the whole name.
Why don't you have, why not present equal time? And they had some guy who was a professional atheist.
Mm-hmm.
And I just laughed at that.
Yeah.
Because
Why? Yeah, you're talking to an audience of Christians. Why? What's the point?
well,
there?
actually, we're not talking to an audience of Christians all.
Mhm.
We do have believers, but we also target people who've never heard of Jesus.
Yeah.
There are people in the world. It's hard for us to realize that in America.
Yeah.
But there are people, if you go to some country,
Oh,
who's
yeah.
that? Who's he?
Mm-hmm.
And
Crazy.
what we do is we teach people there's no preaching. You're not going to hear, if the word hell is mentioned on the air, it's because we refer to a verse in the Bible, and we keep it to one syllable, unlike a lot of our people. It's hell. It's not hail.
That's right.
But
Hail.
we want to be their friends. We want a lot of people listening, most people listening to the radio, they want to know somebody out there cares about them.
Yeah.
That's what we do. We talk to people, we encourage them to write in. We get mail from all over the world, email, postal mail.
Yeah.
And we've been at this since 1983. And since 2016, we've been broadcasting also from Madagascar. So we blanket most of the world, and we're also online. So you can hear our programming anywhere you are in the world, some way or another.
Well, you got to be getting the signal to those other areas
Right.
via a digital stream of some sort, I would imagine.
Yes, and also we still use shortwave radio, which most people think that's antiquated. It's not in these other countries. A lot of these people live in remote areas. This is all they've got.
So you're literally on the airwaves in other countries all over the world.
Right.
Interesting.
Broadcasting from
I got a map here. Put it
yes,
up.
broadcasting from Madagascar down there,
Mm-hmm.
broadcasting from Alaska up there.
And that's all based out of your tower here.
We don't have a tower here. This is just the headquarters. We
Okay.
produce everything. It's sent via internet. Used to be shipped by DHL, I think it was. But now we have Madagascar. Everything we send over by internet,
Right.
and they broadcast from there. And we have more than one transmitter. So
Is it streamed or recorded then rebroadcast?
It's recorded first. Everything is recorded.
Okay.
We could go live, but we'd have to jump through some hoops. And given the time zones, it's just easier to tape everything. So we tape everything.
Is again, getting back to the streaming notion, podcasting, that kind of thing, is that more permeable? Is it more pervasive would that be a better way to get the access in some of these remote areas?
I'm not sure because we're not sure how many people have internet access.
Right.
Some areas they don't.
Yeah. You need a device to receive it too.
Right.
Yeah.
And there are organizations that provide shortwave radios. We talked to the fine folks at Galcom a while back up in Canada. They provide shortwave receivers, and they can be fixed to certain frequencies, and they provide those to people. Here in the States, we have AM, FM, we have internet.
Yeah.
And we broadcast, like I said, everywhere. I mean, we broadcast to the Arabic-speaking world from I think it's called the Voice of Hope in Israel, our Arabic program. Tony Tadros does our Arabic program. And obviously, it's in Arabic, so I don't understand a word of it. But he does a good job. We also have Chinese, Portuguese, Spanish, Chinese, I already said that, Korean, which is fairly new. Our host, he lives in South Korea. His name is Sang Yang. And sometimes when he participates in a hymn, Yang sang. So
but
I was going to work that in, Andy. Our boss is listening to this.
Yeah.
He knows he's going to work that in. The other thing we do is African English.
Mm-hmm.
There are more than 500 languages in Africa, but most countries in Africa use English for business.
Mm-hmm.
It's their second language.
Yeah.
So we do that. It's, slightly different. Our host for that is Edit Udofia, who's a guy from Nigeria. And Edit lives here and just one of the most upbeat people. And he has his traditional Nigerian dress. And so far, he's never let me borrow it. Although I think I could rock it.
Well, now he knows.
Oh, I've asked him.
Really?
But it wouldn't fit because I'm a little bit taller than Edit. But we have a very small but very talented staff. I'm amazed at how much we do. We also have some stringers on the English side, which is my thing. And they will cover stuff like science, entertainment. We throw all that in there because people in other countries are not going to have context to listen to. Open your Bible, woe is us.
Mm-hmm.
People aren't going to have context for that.
Right.
People ask me, well, who's your preacher on there? We don't have a preacher. We do a prayer segment once a week. People write in to our boss, Andy Baker, who I have dubbed the world's pastor, because a lot of people listening, he may be the only one they've got.
Mm-hmm.
And people write in, can you pray for me about this? Can you pray for me about that? And he does it once a week. He records those. We have a segment called First Person where people tell stories of real people in real lives.
Yeah.
And we have a thing called Refiner's Fire. That's more of a testimony thing where people talk about how they overcame rotten stuff through their faith. And we have special reports where we interview different people. We recently talked with Bill O'Reilly about confronting the presidents.
Mm-hmm.
And we also talked to him about killing the witches, which was actually very relevant to what we do because of religious freedom.
Right.
The Salem witch trials led to religious freedom in America, and we try to promote that worldwide. We talk to a lot of experts that we think will be able to help our people. We do anxiety, depression, alcoholism, because those are universal problems.
They're everywhere. It's
Exactly.
Actually, it's on the rise.
And a lot of people
Yeah.
need to know there's hope.
Yeah. The book behind me, you see that pendulum right there?
Yes.
That's actually, of course, to me, the Bible is a definite beacon of hope.
Mhm.
But pendulum is actually everything that we're going through and have been going through in the past several years, to me, is right on schedule. It's supposed to happen, and it all is unpacked in that book. It talks about societal, cultural attitude shifts in 20 and 40-year increments, which it does give you hope because eventually you're like, oh, this is unprecedented times. This has never happened before. No, it has. We've been here before several times.
Troublesome times are here.
Right.
Hey, that'd make a good opening line for a song.
It's a country song.
Gospel song
Yeah.
by the Oak Ridge Boys.
So again, remind me how you monetize. Is it, you said it's through donations?
Right. We
Okay.
have a dedicated staff who go to churches and talk to individuals, sometimes foundations, and raise money.
Okay.
We never ask listeners for money ever.
So it's basically corporate sponsorships, if you will, or donations, you know.
Yeah, it's sponsorships, but it's not like this segment is sponsored by Fred and Martha Jones or whoever.
Right. What do they get out of it when you're actually contributing money or donating money?
They get the satisfaction of knowing that they're doing some good in the world.
Okay. So there's nothing like an on-air component that they're going to get a shout out or
Right.
anything like that. Okay.
There is none of that.
Right.
I will say what our former president, our president emeritus, Charles Caudle, used to say. He used to go to groups and say, we will never ask for money as long as I work there.
Mm-hmm.
And then one day he was speaking at a group at which I was present. He said, we will never ask for money as long as Paul Ladd and I work there. And that got big applause.
Yeah.
I always tell people, we don't ask listeners for money and we don't hate anybody.
Well, I mean, it's not anything different than what a church does. It's asking for a tithe every Sunday. It can be considered a tithe.
Yeah, we ask people, but we do that off the air.
Yeah.
We never ask listeners, hey, we sent you a Bible. Now send us money. We don't ever do that.
Is there anything on the air that say, similar to like what I talked about before with, podcasters that want to monetize and then leading up to it, hey, stick around. This is what funds everything. Is there something that runs on the air that says, listen, you can, if you love what you're doing and we're a part of your life, anything is appreciated. And you can go to
None
this
of that.
website. Really?
Ever.
That's the point, is like, are people even aware of it, that they can do that?
Well,
Sometimes the biggest part of the sale is just making them aware. I didn't know I could do that.
our donors are very generous, very kind people. They just want to get our message out.
That's great.
Now, we did have advertising once. We did, there was a car maker, worldwide car maker. They wanted to advertise on there, so we did a 2-minute commercial, but it did not air in the program. It aired
Right.
before the show started
Right.
because I did the voiceovers. We did an interview with the car maker, and then I remember Charles said, I want to hear more of you. So I went in there and we did,
Yeah.
if you want to know more, go to, www.ournewcar.com, www.ournewcar.com.
They are stacking them deep and selling them cheap. Bruce Bennett Nissan.
I mean, I remember our colleague who was running the board that day, Shumei Lee, who is one of the best tech people I've ever worked with. She was just like, she was amazed I could do that.
Yeah. Who is this person?
Yes, because that's normally not what we do. I mean,
See, that's the thing, is like, whether it's based on principle, asking for money, I don't think is a bad thing. There's nothing wrong with, hey, this is how we support everything, and at least acknowledging that. When I was in the car business, I sold cars. It would take the wind out of their sails when I would say, well, you're making a point on financing. I would go, yeah, we are. We're actually making 2 points. And they would go, oh. I said, we're supposed to make a profit, that we're a business.
well,
This
we're
is
a
how we survive.
nonprofit, and as I like to say, we're in favor of the principle.
Yeah.
We just don't engage in the practice.
Right.
Because a lot of our listeners are in other countries. What are they going to send us? Pesos, pounds? I got paid in pounds once for a job I
Crypto.
did for the BBC. They sent me a check. And the good news was, whatever date the check was written, that was what the exchange rate was. So they had to go back and look, and it was a little higher that day than the day I got the check and cashed it.
Right.
And it was a CHEQUE. But it's the only time I ever got paid in pounds for a segment I did for the BBC on, as they called them, the chat show hosts. I did some interviews with people who had worked with Oprah Winfrey
Wow.
and interviewed her father too. Went to his barber shop. Vernon was the most unassuming guy you'd ever want to meet. And the radio station WVOL over there in near East Nashville, where she started. I think the control room was probably still the same. I think that Coca-Cola can was probably there when she was.
Yeah. Radio station and studios like that tend to, even the studios around Nashville where they're recording the music, like the guys on the Try That podcast, they've been using the same studio to record all Aldean's albums up in Berry Hill since he started recording. And they say, hey, if it works, you don't fix it. And to go in there, you should literally smell the cigarette smoke that is probably eked into the walls or from the years of back in the day. Nothing has changed. It is just completely not dilapidated, but it's certainly long in the tooth, you know?
Yes.
Yeah. But it's a great sounding studio.
Like you said, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
That's right. And it creates that culture, that feel, you know, that it's something that they're comfortable with and you get the best out of the person and stuff like that. But I don't know. I just think that to at least put the idea out there that people know they can contribute, it's not a bad thing, in my opinion. You know, you do you.
Well, our donors contribute. And like I said, the fundraising goes on. We have fundraising lunches and dinners. We'll have one next spring. I don't have the exact date, but I would like you to come and be my guest for that.
Sure. Tell me when.
I will let you know when. I'll check the date.
Be happy to.
But we do a lot on a shoestring budget.
Yeah. As most radio stations do.
And
it doesn't have to be that way.
Well, it amazes me. We're doing 8 different languages.
Mm-hmm.
I have been to bigger organizations. The name escapes me of the people in D.C., not Voice of America, but maybe it's Radio Free Asia. We've been there.
Mm-hmm.
If we had their budget, there's no telling what we could do.
Right.
If they had our budget, they wouldn't be able to do Bupkis.
Well, that's the thing is that, you know, if you could, you know, add 5 to 10% more to the budget every year, what kind of difference does that make? You know?
Well, it was established when they established back in 1976, our founders, that they weren't ever going to ask for money. It was going to be.
I don't think you're asking for money though. You're just letting people know this is powered by money. It takes money for this thing to exist.
Well, that's what we tell the donors. And they send out fundraising letters, and our fundraiser folks are the best. I mean,
I guess the semantics of asking for money, quote unquote, would be having something that said for as little as $25 a month. That's asking for money. Letting people know that, hey, this is powered by donations. If you feel so compelled, do so here. That's an invite if you feel compelled. You know what I mean? That's, I guess, the semantic difference. What is my opinion? I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You have a broadcast tool. You might as well use it to at least, because if 5 to 10% additional revenue makes that big of a difference, why not? And it's, you know, and it's divine provision at that point.
Well, again, our audience is mostly in other countries. So sending money would be.
They could do it to the local areas, right? To the local headquarters in their own, and maybe there's a way they can fund things in those areas too, I guess, right?
Well, our headquarters is here.
Right. But they have the satellite offices.
Yeah, in Madagascar and Anchor Point, Alaska, both of which are very remote places.
Yeah. So Alaska's taken care of. Madagascar, you just have a little bit of a hurdle to conversions and stuff like that.
And again, it's just something that we don't do.
Yeah. I would strongly consider it, but, you know, that's just my opinion. I just think that I teach my kids that the answer to a question, an unasked question, is going to be no, or you're just never going to know what the answer is, you know. I just don't think it's asking for money at that point, but, you know, it is what it is. So how do people find and follow you and do all that stuff moving forward?
Okay, they can check out worldchristian.org. That is our quote-unquote corporate website, worldchristian.org. And there are links to what we do.
Yeah.
And people here in the States, if they want to send us some dough, there's links for that. There are links to listen to today's English broadcast. You can also follow me. I am Paul Ladd1 on X, formerly known as Twitter. I'm also on Facebook as Paul Ladd, and YouTube. I think it's Paul Ladd's YouTube channel. I think it's just what I call it.
You have
Original.
paulladd.com by chance?
Not yet.
Got to get that.
Actually, there is a paulladd.com, but it's a photographer in Texas.
Well, you could do but there's so many different options. This is where I see my talent is being able to see part of what, I guess one of the talents, not to blow smoke up my own butt, is strategizing the easiest way. Because like in radio, what we learned was take away the hoops, right? You want listeners to call in and, try and win a prize. Don't put them through hoops. Just make it easy.
Right.
That's what Bassman taught me. In this case, for you, get a link tree, right? And put all your links right on the link tree where they can find and follow you. Your YouTube's there, X, Instagram, Facebook, the whole 9 yards. That could be your website for the time being. And the next thing to figure out is what your URL is, which could be Paul Ladd Speaks or paulladradio.com, whatever it may be, Paul Ladd Broadcast. All those things could play into it. You could do paulladd.co. All the different new extensions are now acceptable.
And that might not be a bad idea simply because recently on X, I made a comment about something, and some far-right fellow took offense saying, you're this guy, blah, 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 blah. There's a fellow named Paul Ladd who is with the United Nations something or another.
Yeah.
No, that's not me. I'm also not the Paul Ladd that oversaw the big dig in Massachusetts. Yes, in Boston. But I'm not the UN guy. And the guy was like, coming over, look at what this guy does. He doesn't do anything. And I'm thinking, that's not me. And it's obvious because number one, I don't work for the UN. Number two, I'm much better looking and younger than this guy.
I don't disagree with that. Good looking man.
I have a good makeup artist.
That's good. Well, there you go. All the information, as usual, is going to be in the description. Go to worldchristian.org if you want. If you feel so compelled, I'm going to shill for you. If you feel compelled to donate and you check out the product, understand everything's powered by money, nonprofit or otherwise. Go help them out if you feel so compelled. Whatever happens, and I would chalk it up as a tithe at that point because you're helping spread the word. You're helping educate people. I like the fact that it's not a preaching platform. It's a factual, not data-driven probably approach, which has kind of been my understanding of Christianity, and that's how I made the decision, was based on data. Tim Keller-esque approaches, as well as a Case for Christ. Data.
We've had both of those guys on our show, by the way.
Yeah, I bet they're fantastic reads and a lot of fruitful information in those approaches for sure. So, well, there you go, Paul Ladd. Thanks for being on, and of course, you could check us out at MMTBP.com, the Mostly Middle Tennessee Business Podcast. Share, follow, subscribe. If you know somebody who you think would be a good guest for the show, let me know. Send them our way. There's a link right there on the link tree that they can click on and apply to be on the show. Paul, great time to catch up with you, man. I really appreciate you coming out here.
My pleasure being here, Jim. This has been fun.